Nightmare at the abandoned asylum. I still wake up screaming some nights. The doctors say it's PTSD, that what I experienced was some kind of psychotic break triggered by isolation and fear. They claim the human mind can conjure unimaginable horrors when pushed to its limits. But they weren't there. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear the voices that still whisper to me in the dark. 3 months have passed since I stepped foot in Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, and I'm finally ready to share what happened to me. Not for views or attention, God knows I wish I could forget everything, but because I made a promise. A promise to them, the forgotten ones, the ones whose stories died within those walls, or at least should have died. I need you to understand something before I continue. I never believed in ghosts. I was the person who laughed during horror movies, who debunked every creaking floorboard and cold spot in haunted locations. I'm an urban explorer, or I was. For 5 years, I documented abandoned places across the country on my small YouTube channel. Factories, schools, hotels, I'd seen it all. Nothing scared me. Nothing surprised me. Until Westbrook. It started with a text from my friend Marcus. We'd been exploring abandoned places together since college, though he'd recently moved away for work. The message was simple. Dude, check your email. Found your white whale. The email contained an article about Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, a massive asylum that operated from 1923 to 1985 in rural Pennsylvania. I'd heard rumors about it for years, whispers in the urban exploration community about a place so haunted that even the most hardcore explorers wouldn't go near it. But its location had remained a mystery, deliberately scrubbed from public records after its closure. The article included a single black and white photo of an imposing Victorian-style building, all sharp angles and forbidding towers. But what caught my attention was the reason for its closure, a scandal involving experimental treatments, patient deaths, and staff who claimed they quit because of unexplainable phenomena within the building. I called Marcus immediately. How did you find this? I asked, unable to hide my excitement. My new job? I'm digitizing county records. Found these files that were supposed to be sealed. Technically, I shouldn't even have access, but he paused. Look, there's more to it. This place, it's bad, man. Like really bad. The reports I found, patients claiming doctors were possessed, staff reporting objects moving on their own, people getting locked in rooms with no explanation. I laughed. Come on, you know that's just typical asylum urban legend stuff. I don't think so, Marcus said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. There's a reason this place was scrubbed from records. The government didn't just shut it down, they tried to erase it. Which makes it perfect for the channel, I replied. This could be our biggest video yet. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'm not going with you on this one. What? Dude, we've been talking about finding a place like this for years. I know, but I've read the files, okay? I've seen the photos they took during the investigation. Whatever happened there, it wasn't normal. I sighed. Marcus had always been more cautious than me, but this was ridiculous. Fine. Where exactly is this place? He hesitated before giving me the coordinates, making me promise I wouldn't go alone. I agreed, though I had no intention of bringing anyone else. Why split the views on what could be my breakthrough video? One more thing, Marcus added. I dare you to stay the night. I laughed. Seriously? What are we, 12? I'll pay you $200 if you make it till morning, inside the building. You're on, I said without hesitation. Easy money. That's how it started. A dare. $200. The promise of online fame. God, I was so stupid. I spent the next week researching everything I could about Westbrook. The information was scarce. Just as Marcus had said, most records had been purged. But I managed to piece together its history through old newspaper clippings and forum posts from former employees. Westbrook was built to house the mentally ill from wealthy families, a place where the inconvenient relatives could be hidden away from society's judging eyes. But in the 1950s, when funding dried up, it transformed into something darker. Under the direction of Dr. Lawrence Weiss, the hospital began experimental treatments, procedures that pushed well beyond ethical boundaries even for that era. Patients reported seeing shadows move against walls. Staff complained of voices calling their names from empty rooms. Equipment would malfunction without explanation. And then there were the deaths, dozens of them. all officially recorded as natural causes or suicide, but the numbers were too high to be coincidental. In 1985, after a surprise inspection revealed patients in various states of neglect and terror, the facility was shut down overnight. The strangest detail: during the evacuation, 3 patients and 1 doctor seemingly vanished. They were never found. As I packed my equipment 3 days later, cameras, extra batteries, flashlights, a sleeping bag, and enough food and water for 24 hours, I tried to ignore the growing unease in my stomach. I'd explored dozens of abandoned buildings before. This was no different, except deep down, I knew it was. The drive took nearly 5 hours, the last 30 minutes on a dirt road so overgrown I worried my car wouldn't make it. When I finally parked in a clearing about a quarter mile from the coordinates, the sun was already beginning its descent. Perfect timing. I'd arrived just as the golden hour began, ideal lighting for my opening shots. The hike through the woods was harder than expected. No clear path existed, and several times I had to check my GPS to ensure I was heading in the right direction. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, just the sound of my footsteps crushing dead leaves and my own increasingly labored breathing. I first saw Westbrook through a break in the trees, a massive structure silhouetted against the reddening sky. From a distance, it might once have been beautiful, with its Victorian architecture and symmetrical design. Now, it looked like a decaying carcass, windows broken like missing teeth, vines crawling up its facade like parasites. As I approached, the building seemed to grow, stretching impossibly upward until it dominated the skyline. 6 stories of weathered stone and rotting wood, crowned with a clock tower whose hands were permanently fixed at 3:42. Later, I would learn the significance of that time. I set up my first camera on a tripod about 50 yards from the main entrance, filming myself as I narrated my standard introduction. Hey explorers, it's Alex. Today, I'm standing in front of what might be the most notorious abandoned asylum in American history. A place so dark, so twisted, that the government tried to erase it from existence. This is Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, and I'll be spending the next 24 hours discovering its secrets. I smiled at the camera, the practiced, confident smile I'd perfected over years of videos. As always, I'm going in alone, with nothing but my cameras and my wits. No film crew, no fancy equipment, no stage scares, just raw, unfiltered exploration. If only I'd known what waited for me inside, I would have turned around right then. I would have run back to my car and never looked back. But ignorance pushed me forward, toward the massive oak doors that served as the asylum's main entrance. They were chained shut, of course. Most abandoned places were secured in some way, though rarely effectively. I circled the building, filming B-roll of broken windows and crumbling stonework, until I found what I was looking for: a basement window with bars that had partially pulled away from the rotting frame. With some effort, I managed to widen the gap enough to slip through, lowering myself into the darkness below. The smell hit me immediately. A sickening combination of mold, rot, and something else. Something metallic and organic, the smell of old blood. First impressions, I narrated as I turned on my flashlight. This place definitely lives up to the hype. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing a basement storage area filled with rusted equipment and decaying boxes. Temperature's about 10 degrees cooler down here than outside, which is normal for basements. Let's see what we can find. I moved cautiously through the space, filming as I went. Most of the boxes contained mundane items: old linens, administrative paperwork, maintenance supplies. But in a far corner, I discovered something that made my skin crawl. Patient restraints. Dozens of them. Leather straps worn with use, metal buckles still gleaming dully in my flashlight beam. "Look at these," I whispered to my camera. "These aren't just standard restraints. See how thick the leather is? And these reinforced buckles? These were designed for long-term use." I picked one up, intending to examine it closer, when the basement door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. My heart nearly stopped. I spun around, flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone there?" Silence answered me. Just the settling of an old building, I told myself. Nothing unusual. But as I turned back to the restraints, I noticed something I'd missed. Each strap had a name etched into the leather. Patient names. And one, the one I held in my hands, bore fresh scratch marks across the name, as if someone had tried to claw it away. A sudden gust of cold air brushed against my neck, carrying with it a whisper so faint I almost missed it. "Run." I dropped the restraint like it had burned me, backing away. "Just the wind," I muttered, though the air in the basement was completely still. I needed to find the stairs, get to the main floors. This place was already getting to me, and I'd barely begun. The stairwell was narrow, the steps crumbling in places. As I ascended, I could swear I heard footsteps above me, moving in rhythm with my own, stopping when I stopped. I forced myself to keep going, emerging finally into what must have been the main lobby. Once grand, the space now lay in ruins. A massive chandelier had crashed to the floor, crystal pieces scattered like ice across the cracked marble. Reception desks formed a semicircle, their wood rotted and warped. Behind them, a large board still displayed staff names and department assignments, the letters faded but legible. I moved closer to read them, focusing my camera on the board. Most were typical hospital departments: radiology, psychiatric care, administration. But one, listed at the bottom and partially obscured by water damage, made me pause. Special procedures, Dr. L. Weiss, sublevel 3. Sublevel 3? The basement I'd entered through seemed to be the only level below ground. I made a mental note to look for additional stairwells. As I filmed the lobby, providing commentary about the architecture and design choices typical of asylums from this era, I noticed something strange. Though dust covered every surface, there were areas where it had been disturbed. Recent footprints tracked across the floor, disappearing down a hallway to my right. "Looks like I'm not the first visitor Westbrook has had recently," I narrated, following the tracks. "Probably other explorers or local teens. Let's see where they went." The footprints led to a corridor lined with administrative offices. Most doors hung open, revealing ransacked rooms, filing cabinets emptied, furniture overturned, papers strewn about. But one door remained firmly closed, the wood unmarked by the graffiti that covered nearby walls. The footprints stopped directly in front of it. I tried the handle. Locked. Unusual for an abandoned building where most internal doors had either been removed or broken open. "This is interesting," I told my viewers. "A locked door in a place that's been abandoned for nearly 40 years. Let's see if we can find out what's so special about this room." I checked the nameplate. Dr. Lawrence Weiss, Medical Director. The same Dr. Weiss from the Special Procedures Department. My curiosity piqued. I've picked enough locks in my exploration career to handle a simple office door. Within minutes, I heard the satisfying click of the tumbler giving way. The door swung inward, revealing an office preserved like a time capsule. Unlike the chaos outside, everything here was in perfect order. Books lined the shelves, a leather chair sat behind an immaculate desk, and framed credentials hung on the wall. No dust, no signs of decay. It looked as if someone had cleaned it that very morning. "This is unexpected," I said, panning my camera slowly around the room. "It's like the outside world never touched this place." On the desk sat a leather-bound journal, open to a page dated May 17, 1985, 2 days before the hospital's closure. I leaned closer to read, adjusting my camera to capture the neat handwriting. The procedure was successful beyond expectations. Subject 23 responded to the treatment with unprecedented neural activity. The shadows appeared within 2 minutes of initiation, visible to all present. Dr. Chambers remains skeptical, attributing the phenomena to mass hysteria, but the readings cannot be denied. "We have established contact. The barrier is thinning. One more session should suffice." A chill ran down my spine. What kind of procedure made shadows appear? What barrier was he referring to? I turned the page but found it blank. Flipping through the rest of the journal revealed nothing but empty pages, except for the very last one, which contained a single line: "They're coming through." As I read those words aloud for my video, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged in front of me, the sudden cold biting at my skin. The door I'd carefully propped open slowly swung shut with a soft click. And then, just at the edge of my hearing, came the sound of my own name, whispered by a voice I didn't recognize. "Alexander." I spun around, camera clutched tightly in my shaking hand. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer came, but as I turned back to the desk, I noticed something that hadn't been there moments before: a small brass key placed precisely in the center of the open journal. Okay, I whispered to myself. That wasn't there before. That was not there before. I should have left. Any rational person would have recognized the warning signs and gotten out while they could. But I wasn't thinking rationally. All I could see was the potential views this video would generate, the subscribers, the ad revenue, my ticket out of my dead-end day job. So instead of running, I picked up the key. It was ice cold to the touch, and engraved on its head was a simple marking, SL3, sublevel 3. Well, I told my camera, forcing a smile despite the fear building in my chest. Looks like someone, or something, wants me to go deeper, and you know I never back down from a challenge. If only I had. If only I had walked away right then, back to my car, back to my normal life. But I didn't. And as I slipped the key into my pocket, I swear I heard soft laughter echoing from the empty corners of that impossible, untouched office. The first hint that I wasn't alone in Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital. The first warning I chose to ignore. The moment the nightmare truly began. The sun was setting as I left Dr. Weiss's office, casting long shadows through the broken windows. I had maybe an hour of natural light left before I'd be completely dependent on my flashlights and camera night vision. I decided to explore the patient wings before searching for the elusive sublevel 3. The eastern corridor stretched before me, doors lining both sides, patient rooms, according to the faded signs. Most were in similar states of decay, metal bed frames with rotting mattresses, nightstands emptied of personal belongings, walls covered in peeling paint, and occasionally desperate messages scratched by former occupants. Please let me out. He comes at night. The shadows have teeth. Pretty standard stuff for abandoned asylums, I narrated, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Former patients expressing their delusions and fears. But as I moved deeper into the wing, the rooms began to tell a different story. Restraint hooks on beds, scratch marks on walls that looked like they'd been made by human fingernails, and most disturbing of all, detailed drawings of the same figure. A tall, emaciated man with impossibly long arms and no face, just smooth skin where features should be. In room after room, this figure appeared, drawn in pencil, scratched into walls, even painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. Sometimes alone, sometimes standing among a group of patients, one long finger pressed where lips would be, as if urging silence. This is unusual, I admitted to the camera. I've seen patient artwork before, but never such consistency across different rooms. It's almost as if they all saw the same thing. As I filmed one particularly detailed drawing, my camera battery, fully charged when I entered, suddenly died. The screen went black without warning. Damn it, I muttered, reaching for my spare. But before I could switch batteries, I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving down the hallway outside the room. I froze. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Hello? I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. Is someone there? The door, which had been half closed, slowly began to open wider. My heart pounded against my ribs as I raised my flashlight, ready to confront whoever, or whatever, was on the other side. The beam illuminated an empty hallway. I let out a shaky breath and quickly changed my camera battery. Technical difficulties, folks, but we're back up and running. I tried to sound casual, professional, though adrenaline was coursing through my veins. As I turned to leave the room, something caught my eye. On the bed, where nothing had been moments before, now lay a patient file, yellow with age but intact. I approached cautiously, half expecting it to disappear or transform, but it remained solid as I picked it up, opening to the first page. Patient number 23, the same number mentioned in Dr. Weiss's journal. The file contains standard information: admission date, diagnosis, schizophrenia with unusual perceptual abnormalities, treatment notes. But attached to the back was a photograph that made my blood run cold. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, stared at the camera with empty eyes. Behind him, clearly visible despite the photo's age and graininess, stood the figure from the drawings. Tall, faceless, one long finger extended toward the patient's head. The photo was labeled, Patient number 23, final session, May 18, 1985. The day before the hospital closed. I nearly dropped the file, my hands trembling so badly the pages rattled. This wasn't a drawing. This was a photograph. Either an elaborate hoax or no. I wouldn't let myself think that way. There had to be a logical explanation. Interesting staging by the hospital staff, I narrated, trying to maintain my skeptical persona. Probably to document the patient's delusions in a visual format. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. The figure in the photo seemed too solid, too present. And the look in the patient's eyes, absolute terror mixed with something like resignation. I tucked the file into my backpack. Evidence, research material. That's what I told myself. As I stepped back into the hallway, the temperature dropped again, my flashlight dimming for a moment before returning to full brightness. And there, at the far end of the corridor, I saw a silhouette. Human shape, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, arms hanging too low. It stood motionless, watching me. I couldn't make out any features in the distance and shadow, but I felt its attention like a physical weight. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing. "This is private property. Identify yourself." The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stood watching. I raised my camera, zooming in to get a better look. But through the viewfinder, the hallway appeared empty. I looked up, confused. The figure was still there, visible to my naked eye, but somehow absent from the camera's digital display. And then it moved, not walking, but gliding backward, disappearing around a corner without ever turning away from me. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But that damned curiosity, that need for content that would set my channel apart, it pushed me forward. "I think someone's playing games with me," I said to the camera, forcing confidence into my voice. "Let's go say hello, shall we?" I moved down the hallway, my footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. Rounding the corner where the figure had disappeared, I found myself facing a stairwell I hadn't noticed before, an ornate spiral staircase descending into darkness. A small sign on the wall read simply, "Authorized personnel only, sublevel access." This was it, the way down to sublevel 3. As I stood contemplating my next move, a cold breeze rushed up from below, carrying with it the faintest sound of voices, too distant to make out words, just the cadence of multiple people speaking simultaneously. "Well, viewers," I said, adjusting my camera strap, "looks like we've found our next destination." The spiral staircase seemed to descend much deeper than should have been possible for a building of Westbrook's size. I counted the flights as I went down, 1 floor, 2, 3, and still the stairs continued. The walls changed from plaster to rough stone, the air growing colder and damper with each step. After what felt like 5 or 6 floors down, far deeper than any basement should have been, I finally reached a landing with a heavy metal door. A keypad was mounted beside it, the technology surprisingly modern compared to the ancient stairs. But the keypad was dead, no lights indicating power. Next to it, almost hidden in shadow, was a small keyhole. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around the brass key I'd found in Dr. Weiss's office. It slid into the lock with a soft click. As I turned the key, the voices I'd heard earlier suddenly stopped. Complete silence fell, as if the entire building held its breath. The door swung open on surprisingly well-oiled hinges, revealing a long concrete hallway illuminated by emergency lights glowing with dim red light. Electricity. In a building abandoned for decades. "This is unexpected," I whispered, stepping through the doorway. "There shouldn't be power anywhere in this building." The hallway stretched ahead, doors on either side marked with numbers, SL31, SL32, and so on. At the far end stood double doors with a simple label, "Procedure Room." As I moved forward, I noticed something bizarre about the hallway. While the upper floors of Westbrook showed decades of abandonment and decay, this sublevel looked almost new. The concrete was clean, the paint fresh, the red emergency lights fully functional. "It's like I've stepped into a different time period," I told my camera. "Everything down here is preserved or maintained." I tried the first door, SL31. It opened easily, revealing what could only be described as an observation room. A desk with monitors faced a large glass window, beyond which lay a small, padded cell. The monitors were off, but modern. Flat screens, not the bulky CRTs that would have been used in the 1980s. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered. "This equipment is contemporary. Someone has been using this facility recently." Moving to the next room, I found a similar setup, but with one chilling difference. The glass separating the observation area from the cell was shattered, and the padded walls beyond were covered in a dark substance that could only be blood. Handprints stretched from floor to ceiling, as if someone had been desperately trying to climb the walls. My camera battery died again without warning. "Come on," I hissed, digging in my bag for another spare. But as I searched, the red emergency lights began to flicker, plunging the hallway into momentary darkness every few seconds. In one of those flashes of darkness, I heard a door open somewhere down the hall. Flash, the hallway empty. Darkness. Flash, still empty. Darkness. Flash, and there it was, the figure from the photograph, standing at the far end of the hall by the procedure room. Tall, thin, faceless. Darkness again. When the lights flashed back on, it had moved closer, impossibly closer. 20 feet away now, its featureless face tilted as if in curiosity. I stumbled backward, fumbling with my flashlight. The beam caught the figure full on, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. It wore what might once have been a doctor's white coat, now stained with substances I didn't want to identify. Where a face should have been was just smooth, pale skin, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. But somehow, I knew it was looking at me, studying me. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands with fingers too long, too numerous. One of those hands now raised, a single elongated finger extending toward me in a gesture that could have been beckoning or warning. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Terror rooted me to the spot as the lights flickered again. Darkness, flash, 10 feet away. Darkness, flash, 5 feet. It reached for me, those impossible fingers stretching even longer, defying anatomy and physics. And then salvation. My fingers closed around my flashlight. I raised it, thumb finding the switch. The powerful beam illuminated the hallway just as the emergency lights went out completely. For a split second, I saw the figure recoil, that smooth skin where a face should be rippling like disturbed water. Then it was gone. Vanished between one heartbeat and the next. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I ran, flashlight beam bouncing wildly as I sprinted back toward the stairwell. But as I rounded the corner, I discovered a horrifying truth. The door I'd entered through was gone. In its place was solid concrete wall, as if the door had never existed. "No," I gasped, running my hands over the smooth surface. "No." Trapped. I was trapped in sublevel 3. My mind raced through options. There had to be another way out. Emergency exits, maintenance tunnels, something. The procedure room. If this level had been recently used as the modern equipment suggested, there had to be access from that room to the outside. I turned, facing back down the hallway where I'd seen the figure. My only choice was to go deeper toward whatever waited for me in that procedure room. The walk back down the hallway was the longest of my life. Each step felt like moving through molasses, my fear a physical weight dragging at my limbs. But somehow I made it to those double doors without encountering the faceless entity again. Procedure room read the simple plaque. Below it, someone had added a handwritten note, the threshold. I pushed the doors open, my flashlight revealing what lay beyond. The room was circular, easily 50 feet in diameter. The walls were lined with computer equipment, monitors displaying scrolling data I couldn't begin to understand. In the center of the room sat what looked like an operating table, surrounded by machinery that seemed both medical and something else. Something I had no frame of reference for. But what drew my eye, what made my heart nearly stop, was the floor. The concrete had been carved with intricate patterns, circles within circles, strange symbols weaving between them, all centering on the spot beneath the operating table. It wasn't the craftsmanship that disturbed me. It was the fact that the carvings glowed with a faint blue light, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. As I stood frozen in the doorway, the computers suddenly hummed to life, screens brightening, data scrolling faster. A mechanical voice spoke from hidden speakers. Procedure initialization detected. Subject present. Continuing protocol 23. The operating table's restraints opened like waiting arms. "Wait," I said, backing away. "I'm not a subject. I'm not part of this." "Identity confirmed," the voice continued, ignoring my protests. "Alexander Mercer, age 28, selected." How did it know my name? How could a system abandoned for decades identify me? The doors slammed shut behind me, cutting off my escape. The blue glow from the floor intensified, the patterns beginning to shift and move as if alive. On the largest monitor, a video began to play. Dr. Weiss, I recognized him from photos in my research, stood in this very room, addressing the camera. If you're seeing this, it means you've been chosen. The entity has selected you, just as it selected me all those years ago. I know you're afraid. I was too. But fear is necessary for the procedure. Fear thins the veil between worlds. The video showed clips of patients strapped to the same table I now faced, their bodies contorting as blue light engulfed them. Their screams had been muted, but their faces told the story, agony beyond imagination. We discovered it by accident, Weiss continued. A patient who could see beyond our reality. Through him, the entity communicated, showed us the truth, that our world is just a thin membrane away from theirs. With the right subject, the right procedure, we can open the door. The last clip showed patient number 23, the young man from the photograph. As blue light surrounded him, the air above the table seemed to tear open, a darkness deeper than black emerging. And from that darkness came a hand, long-fingered, inhuman. We succeeded, Weiss said, his face transformed by manic joy. We opened the door, but we couldn't control what came through. The video cut to chaos, staff running, alarms blaring, and moving through it all, the faceless figure I'd encountered in the hallway. Weiss appeared one last time, blood streaming from a wound on his forehead. It wants more. It always wants more. And now it wants you. The video ended, the screen displaying a simple countdown, 60 seconds. I ran to the doors, pulling frantically at the handles. Locked. Of course they were locked. The computers whirred louder, the blue glow from the floor growing brighter. The air above the operating table began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. 50 seconds. I searched desperately for anything I could use as a weapon, a tool, anything to stop whatever was happening. But the room held nothing but the immovable equipment and that terrible table. 40 seconds. The patterns on the floor were definitely moving now, shifting and realigning themselves into new configurations. The blue light had begun to rise, forming a column above the table. 30 seconds. I tried the only thing I could think of, my keycard from the earlier door. I swiped it through the reader beside the monitors. To my shock, the countdown paused at 27 seconds. Emergency override, announced the mechanical voice. Authorization required. A password prompt appeared on the screen. I had no idea what the password might be. I tried Weiss, nothing. Entity, nothing. Threshold, nothing. 20 seconds. In desperation, I pulled out the patient file I'd found earlier, the one for patient number 23. Scanned it frantically for anything that might help. There, a patient name. Robert James Thorne. I typed Thorne into the prompt. Authorization accepted, the voice announced. Emergency shutdown initiated. The blue light dimmed, the patterns on the floor freezing in place. Relief flooded through me until the voice spoke again. Warning, unstable termination detected, containment breach imminent. The air above the table, it was still shimmering, still thinning, but now it looked wrong, like a controlled process suddenly gone haywire. Full emergency protocols engaged, the voice continued. Facility lockdown in effect. Lockdown, that meant no way out. I backed against the wall as the shimmer above the table expanded, stretching wider and wider until it tore, a ragged black hole hanging in midair. Cold air rushed from it, carrying a smell like ozone and rotting meat. Something was coming through. I could see movement in that impossible darkness, shapes that hurt my eyes to look at. And then a hand emerged. Gray skin stretched over too many joints, fingers numbering 7 or 8. It gripped the edge of the tier as if it were solid, pulling. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Could only watch as a head began to emerge. The faceless one I'd seen before, that smooth skin now rippling and shifting as if something moved beneath it. It saw me. I don't know how with no eyes, but I felt its attention lock onto me like a physical force. It smiled. The smooth skin split, revealing not a mouth but a tear that stretched from ear to non-existent ear, filled with teeth like broken glass. Alexander, it said, its voice echoing both in my ears and inside my head. We've been waiting for you. I screamed then, a sound torn from the deepest part of me. Terror beyond anything I'd ever known consumed me as the entity pulled itself further through the tier, its impossible body contorting in ways that defied physics and sanity. It was halfway through when the facility's true emergency system finally activated. Sirens wailed, red lights replacing the blue glow. Steel shutters began to descend from the ceiling, not to trap me, I realized, but to contain what was coming through. The entity hissed, its head swiveling toward the descending shutters. It knew what they meant. In that moment of distraction, I made my move. I lunged for the doors, which had unlocked when the emergency system engaged, and burst through them into the hallway beyond. Behind me, I heard the entity scream, a sound like metal tearing and children crying all at once. It wasn't angry, it was laughing. The shutters crashed down, sealing the entity inside the procedure room, for now. I ran down the hallway, desperate to find another exit. At the far end, past all the observation rooms, a sign glowed faintly, "Emergency Exit." It led to an elevator with a single keycard reader. I swiped the keycard I'd found earlier, and the doors slid shut with a soft hiss. The elevator moved not up, but sideways, accelerating far faster than any elevator should. When the doors opened, I found myself in a vast circular chamber lined with glass tubes, each containing a floating human form suspended in bluish liquid. Hundreds of them, extending up as far as I could see. In the center stood a control console surrounding a column of blue light that stretched from floor to ceiling, the same blue luminescence I'd seen in the procedure room, but concentrated, controlled. The floating figures in the tubes, some wore patient gowns, others staff uniforms. All had their eyes open, staring emptily ahead. As I stood trying to make sense of it all, a voice spoke from hidden speakers. "You made it. Good. We were starting to worry." I spun around, searching for the source. "Who's there? Show yourself. Look up to your right, tube 437. I followed the instructions and found a man in his 60s wearing a doctor's coat. Unlike the others, his eyes moved, following me. "Dr. Weiss?" I asked in disbelief. "What's left of me?" the voice confirmed. "My body has been here for 40 years, but my mind they keep active, to monitor, to maintain." "This is impossible," I said. "Not alive, not dead, something in between, just like all of us here. They need us conscious to feed on our fear, our confusion, our despair." "They? You mean that thing I saw in the procedure room?" "Just one of many. We opened a door we couldn't close, Mr. Mercer. We tore the barrier between worlds, and they've been coming through ever since, preparing for the final breach that will allow them all through at once." "What do I have to do with this?" "They choose people with reach, with audiences. You have your viewers. Before you, they chose a journalist. Before him, a popular author. They use you to spread their influence. My YouTube channel, my thousands of subscribers. If I posted a video about Westbrook, how many would be curious enough to seek it out themselves?" "The pattern on the floor," Weiss continued. "Did you film it?" I nodded. "Then it's already too late. The pattern is a key. Anyone who sees it, even in a recording, becomes a potential doorway. Their minds are altered, made receptive." "How do I stop it?" I demanded. "You can't close it completely, but you can contain it, reset the system. There's a protocol, Contingency 5. I moved to the control panel, searching for anything that might indicate this, Contingency 5. The symbols continued to shift and change, refusing to stay fixed. "Your blood," Weiss explained. "The console requires blood, human intent carried in human DNA. Place your hand on the central panel and think of sealing, of closing, of ending." The chamber shuddered. Somewhere far below, something massive was moving. The blue light fluctuated, dimming momentarily before flaring brighter. I placed my hand on the central panel, which felt unnaturally warm and seemed to pulsate beneath my palm. I cut myself with my pocket knife, letting my blood make contact with the surface. The moment my blood touched the panel, the blue light surged, so bright I had to shield my eyes. The console hummed, the pitch rising higher and higher. "Focus," Weiss shouted over the noise. "Think of sealing the breach. Picture it closing in your mind." I did as he instructed, imagining the tear I'd seen in the procedure room shrinking, closing, disappearing. The chamber shook violently. Glass tubes began to crack, the blue fluid leaking out. The bodies inside convulsed, their mouths opening in silent screams. "It's working," Weiss called out. "Keep going. Don't break contact." The pain in my hand intensified, spreading up my arm as if my veins were filling with fire. "Breach containment initiated," announced a mechanical voice. "Full facility purge in 2 minutes." "It means you've done it," Weiss said with relief. "The system is resetting. Everything here will be destroyed. The research, the equipment, the breaches, and us with it." "What about you?" All these people? We're already dead, Mr. Mercer. Have been for 40 years. This is our release. The tubes were breaking faster now, bodies falling to the floor, but then beginning to move, to stand, all turning toward me with empty eyes. Go, Weiss shouted. The red door behind you. It will take you to the surface. I ran for the red door he'd indicated, climbing inside a metal capsule. It shot upward with incredible force, nearly causing me to black out. Through a small porthole, I watched as the chamber fell away below, the blue light overtaken by expanding darkness. Then a blast wave hit, the shock of it rocking the capsule violently. Heat followed, so intense that the metal walls around me warmed to the touch. The facility was self-destructing, taking all its secrets with it. When the capsule finally stopped and the door opened, I emerged into pre-dawn forest, maybe half a mile from where I'd first entered Westbrook. In the distance, I could see the asylum's main building silhouetted against the lightening sky. As I watched, the ground around Westbrook began to collapse, the entire structure sinking into a rapidly forming sinkhole. Within minutes, nothing remained but a depression in the earth, as if the building had been swallowed whole. It was over, or so I thought. I made it back to my car as the sun rose. When I later reviewed my footage, I discovered something chilling. From the moment I entered Sublevel 3, my camera had recorded nothing but static. All except for one frame, a single, crystal-clear image of the pattern on the procedure room floor, its symbols perfectly preserved, as if something had wanted me to capture just that. I deleted everything immediately, formatted the memory card, even took a hammer to it for good measure. That should have been the end. I should have been safe. But 3 days later, I noticed a mark on my palm where I'd cut myself. The wound had healed, but a pattern remained, a faint scar in the shape of one of the symbols I'd seen on that chamber floor. A week after that, I began to see things from the corner of my eye, tall, thin figures that vanished when I turned to look, whispers just at the edge of hearing. My dreams filled with endless corridors and faces without features. I visited doctors, therapists, even a priest. They all said the same thing: PTSD, trauma. My mind processing what I believed I had experienced. But it was real. I know it was real. Because sometimes late at night, my computer turns on by itself. The screen fills with those shifting, impossible symbols from the control console. And in the reflection of the monitor, I see it standing behind me, faceless, patient, waiting. They're still out there, still trying to break through. And somehow, I brought a piece of them back with me. That's why I'm sharing this story now. Not as content for views, but as a warning. If you ever hear about Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, stay away. If you find documents about special procedures or threshold research, burn them. And if you ever see a tall figure with no face, run. Run and don't look back. Because the doors between worlds aren't as solid as we think, and what waits on the other side is hungry. I thought that would be the end of my story. But yesterday, everything changed. I received a plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. The paper contained just 3 words: "They're coming through." The handwriting was my own. The key, identical to the one I found in Dr. Weiss's office, had a new engraving. Not SL3, but SL4. As I held it, my scar began to burn, the symbol on my palm glowing with that same blue light I'd seen in Westbrook. And in my head, clear as day, I heard Dr. Weiss's voice one last time. It was never about stopping them, Mr. Mercer. It was about becoming their voice. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I'm becoming, but I feel them inside me now, pushing at the edges of my consciousness, waiting to emerge. If you're reading this, it may already be too late. The pattern is in your mind. The key is turning, and somewhere, a door is opening.